The year 2022 is about to end, and it becomes necessary to take a look at all the important events that happened this year. Welcome to this new program of Drishti IAS. Today, through this video, we will take a glance at the important economic events of 2022, that is, a quick revision of the events that took place in the realm of the economy. So, the year 2022 started with a piece of big news in the telecom sector, under which, after a long battle, some telecom companies finally opted for the government proposal to convert the interest payable on adjusted gross revenue into equity. To understand this news in more detail, we will have to first understand its background. So the matter starts in 2019 when the Supreme Court upheld the validity of Department of Telecom's notification to include non-telecom revenue in the definition of AGR, but the telecom sector has always been opposing it. Due to this, the companies had to pay an additional amount of rupees 1.4 crore. Here, AGR refers to the amount of revenue that is used to calculate license fee and spectrum fee. Now it is obvious that if the AGR is high, then the companies will have to pay more money, even though the financial condition of those companies was already in bad shape. Keeping this in mind, the government gave these companies two options: either pay the full interest or release equity of the same value to the central government. In this, some companies opted for the first one, whereas some opted for the second. Meanwhile, the news also came regarding the Reserve Bank of India retaining the status of some banks as domestic systemic important bank. These were the banks that were deemed too big to fail. In simple words, these are such banks whose failure may cause huge losses to the country's economy. These banks include the State Bank of India, ICICI Bank, and HDFC Bank. As per the rules, banks whose total assets exceed 2% of the country's total GDP are given this type of recognition. Our next news is about the National Land Monetization Corporation, which has been set up recently to monetize vacant land and unused properties of government institutions so that the government can get an additional revenue source. And with this revenue, more assets can be created, which can be used for the infrastructure creation in the future. Let's move ahead. The next news came out as a big achievement for the country, where the neighboring country Nepal became the first country in the world to adopt India's UPI system. Now you might remember that UPI was launched in India in the year 2016. The system provides an instant payment facility to general public and can be used round the clock on any day, including on public holidays. Let's talk about water taxis next. This year itself, the news came out that for the first time in the country, water taxis started plying from Mumbai to Navi Mumbai. These water taxis will provide a better and more comfortable option of transportation to passengers, which will not only save time but the environmental damage can also be reduced. The next news is of the month of March, when the government's flagship Sagarmala project completed 7 years. This scheme was approved by the cabinet in 2015 to develop the overall port infrastructure along India's 7,516 km long coastline. Along with this, concepts like modernization, mechanization and computerization will also be used in it. Let us tell you that according to the government, if this project is implemented properly, then by the year 2025, India's exports can be increased to $110 billion, and due to this, about 10 million new jobs will also be created. So it's very much obvious that the project can prove to be extremely important for the country, especially for the country's infrastructure sector. Now let's move on. You might remember that the Government of India launched GST, that is Goods and Services Tax, in the year 2017. And the GST Council was constituted to determine the tax rates in the GST system and to take all other decisions related to it. Now recently, the Supreme Court has clarified in one of its decisions that the recommendations of the GST Council are not binding on the union and state governments. That is, the governments don't need to accept these recommendations. This decision simply means that the union and the state government can refuse to accept the rates decided by the GST Council and may set different rates for GST by making laws. At the same time, many experts have expressed concerns about this, arguing that if different rates are set in different states, then the GST system and GST assessment across the country will become even more complicated. However, the most important thing to be kept in mind is that the union and the states are represented in the GST Council through their representatives or ministers. Here, all the decisions are taken only with the consent of the union and the state governments. In such a situation, it can be expected that there will not be any special effect of this decision of the Supreme Court. Apart from this, the GST system has also completed its 5 years this year. Let's move ahead and talk about India's international trade. So this year, when the Ministry of Commerce released statistics in this regard, it was found that in 2021-22, America became India's largest trading partner, leaving behind China. China ranked second in terms of international trade, while the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Iraq ranked third, fourth and fifth respectively. In the year 2021-22, the India-US trade stood at around $119.42 billion, which was about $80.51 billion in the preceding year. At the same time, a similar news also came from the country's sugarcane industry, where after a gap of 5 years, Maharashtra has once again become the largest sugar-producing state in the country, leaving behind Uttar Pradesh. In fact, sugar production of Uttar Pradesh has come down. One of the reasons for this was that sugarcane is being used by the UP government mainly in the production of ethanol. Let us tell you that the sugar industry of India is considered very important because it's a means of livelihood for about 50 million farmers of the country. Moving ahead, let's talk about a report of Niti Aayog. In view of the growing impact of gig economy in India, earlier also Niti Aayog had issued a report in which it said that by the year 2029-2030, about 23.5 million workers are expected to join gig economy. It has been said in the report that although the model of gig economy is emerging in almost all the regions and sectors of the country, but even in this, a total of 47% people are engaged in works which require only medium level of skill. Talking about gig workers, these are people who earn their livelihood by staying outside the traditional employer-employee system. In this system, people working with companies like Ola, Uber, Swiggy, or people largely working on freelance, etc. can be included. Now that the gig economy is comparatively a new model, there is no established law in this regard in the country, which has emerged as a big challenge. Because of the absence of laws, workers face various challenges like job insecurity, irregular pay, and lack of workplace safety. In such a situation, by addressing all these challenges, the government can make the gig economy an important pillar of the country's economy. Now you must have seen that every year recruitment is done for the entry-level posts in bank. But do you know that a board was also constituted by the government for appointment to important posts in public sector banks, which was called Bank Board Bureau? But this year, the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet approved a government proposal for the establishment of the Financial Services Institution Bureau in place of the Banks Board Bureau, which will appoint not only the directors and non-executive chairmen in banks, but also office bearers of government insurance companies. Now, this institution will also advise the government on all matters related to employee management in government financial institutions, so that the working efficiency of these institutions can be improved. Now, let's talk about the need to create a new institution. Since its inception, allegations have been made against the Bank Board Bureau that it takes a lot of time for appointments at big posts, which harmed public sector banks and other financial companies. They suffered as it affected their work. Apart from this, the Delhi High Court had also limited the powers of the Bank Board Bureau for one of its decisions last year. Keeping all these things in mind, a new board was constituted by the government. Moving forward, this year, SEBI, that is, Securities Exchange Board of India, introduced the concept of blue bond. This was done keeping in mind the environment and sustainable financing. It will be a special financial instrument of its kind. Through this, efforts will be made to further increase investment in the blue economy, along with clean and healthy oceans. Talking about the blue economy, it means sustainable use of marine resources for economic growth, better livelihood, and jobs. Thus, blue bonds will provide an opportunity to mobilize private sector capital for better utilization of marine resources. According to experts, the concept of blue bond in India can be used in marine resource mining, sustainable fisheries, offshore wind power, Apart from this, the concept of moonlighting was also very popular this year. In fact, this year, many industry leaders expressed their concerns about the growing moonlighting culture in India, and due to this, employees of many big companies like Wipro and Infosys also lost their job. To put it in simple words, if you do some other work after your regular working hours to earn extra money, then this kind of culture is called moonlighting. Actually, this kind of concept originated in America, where some people started doing a second job or some other work apart from their regular job to earn some extra money. Moonlighting culture has often been criticized for a reduction in the productivity of people in their regular jobs, which ultimately costs the company. This is the reason why many companies have been raising concerns about such a concept. Meanwhile, in one of its important decisions, the Reserve Bank has made card tokenization mandatory in India from 1st October 2022. Now you might ask, what is meant by tokenization? Tokenization refers to the process of converting the details of a credit card or debit card into an alternative code called a token. In fact, earlier, it was seen that many online companies used to save sensitive data of debit and credit cards of their customers in their database. In such a situation, in the event of the company's database being hacked, there was a risk of leakage of important data of the customers. And in the last few years, we also got to see many such incidents. And that is why now the concept of tokenization has been introduced by the Reserve Bank to secure the interests of their customers. Our next news is about central bank digital currency, for which RBI started a pilot project this year, and a concept note was also issued related to it. We can see CBDC as a digital form of paper currency or fiat currency of a country. That is, if RBI issues such currency, then it will be called a digital form of rupee or e-rupee. The most special thing about this type of currency is that it is operated by the central bank of the country, unlike cryptocurrencies that are not operated by any particular institution. RBI believes that through such a concept, the cost of printing and maintaining paper currency can be reduced, which means that it will reduce the operational cost of RBI. It will also protect Indian citizens from the uncertainties present in cryptocurrencies. Now finally, let's talk about the biggest news related to the economic world, that is Nobel Prize in Economics. For the year 2022, 3 economists from America were awarded the Nobel Prize. This award was given to them mainly for explaining the contributions of the banking sector to the country's economy. Ben S. Bernanke, Douglas W. Diamond, and Philip H. Dybvig are 3 of these economists. These economists explained in their research that if banks are not regulated properly, how it can lead to a major economic crisis in a country. Ben S. Bernanke cited the US recession of the 1930s as an example, stating that the US banks did not fail because of the recession. The failure of other banks eventually led to a wider recession. That is, the failure of banks is not a result of the recession, else it is a cause of the recession. Whereas, both Diamond and Dybvig developed theoretical models explaining why the presence of banks is necessary for the development of society and how banks are sensitive to rumors in society. So these were some news through which you can roughly understand the entire economic scenario of the year 2022.